So as I've been continuing my domain-specific language, or DSL, concept for building HTML emails using ColdFusion custom tags, I've continued to think about creating more complex layouts and how I can create abstractions that strike a nice balance between complexity and elegance. And I keep thinking about something like this image grid here, where I have 4 images and I want it to be responsive, so when you go into a mobile layout, it becomes a stacked set of images rather than the 2x2 grid. And I don't want all of the complexity of this leaking out into the parent email markup. So what I've settled on is borrowing a concept of content projection from Angular using this idea of slots. So if we look at the code for this email, we can see that I have a image grid component, which is similar to the first blog post that I had on the ColdFusion custom tag DSL concept. But as we scroll down, what we'll see is that inside of the image grid, we have these slots. And here you can see the slot has a name, images, and it's multi-set to true. And what this multi-set to true means is that it's going to treat multiple slots with the same name as an array. And you can see inside of each slot, we have an image tag. Right? So essentially what the slots are going to be doing is aggregating these 4 image tag content renderings into an array called images, and that images array is going to be exposed to this image grid ColdFusion custom tag in a property called slots. So if we look at the image grid, what you'll see is that in the start mode, the start execution mode of the ColdFusion custom tag, I'm creating this slots object, which has a images property, and this maps to the concept of slots and that name of images that we saw here in the HTML. So the start tag sets up the slot containers, also can provide some theming. You can see we have a border radius on the image, which we're seeing here in clients that support it. And then in the end execution mode of the ColdFusion custom tag, we now have a populated slots.images array, which we can now render as HTML. And in this case, I'm not doing anything fancy. I'm just assuming that all 4 properties have been populated, and we're outputting it in a 2x2 table grid. Now, this uses the multi-true, but then I also have the concept of links. And let's just, if we look back in the HTML here, you can see I have this 2 links side by side. And this is going to use the same concept of content projection. So if we look in the HTML, and we scroll down, what you can see, I have this links ColdFusion custom tag, and it has 2 slots. Instead of using the multi equals true to create an array, in this case, they're each going to be uniquely named, left and right. And if we look at the links component, or the links ColdFusion custom tag, again, we have in our start mode, we have the definition of the slots that are going to be populated. And you can see here I have 2 properties within the slots object corresponding to the 2 uniquely named slots within the HTML, left and right. And just as we saw with the image grid, in the end execution mode of that links ColdFusion custom tag, we're simply taking these 2 values and we're outputting them in a more complex layout, in this case, HTML. Now, the nice thing about slots is that it takes arbitrary content. So I could come in here and let's just put HTMLP. I could say me and Jeremiah. And if we come back over to the browser and we refresh, you can see here's the me and Jeremiah added to that first one. So it's very flexible in that we can put anything in there that we want. And it provides a hook for us to do some theming, right? Let's come back in here and say border radius. And let's just say border 3 pixels solid, deep pink, and we refresh. Why did that not work? Deep pink. There we go. So what we can see is that the ColdFusion custom tag abstraction here allows us to set up the slots, provide some default theming for the projected content, and then the end mode allows us to wrap that content in more complex layouts. So how does the slot actually work? It's super simple. essentially, here's our slot. It takes the name it's required, and then it defaults the multi-concept to false. It gets the parent slots, so it walks up the base tag list looking for the first tag that has a slots property, and then it grabs that, and then we either append it if it's multi, or we overwrite it if it's not multi. And if we look at the get parent slots, what we can see is we're getting the base tag list, and then we essentially just walk up the list looking for that slots, and the first slots that we hit, we return that, and that's what we end up using in our evaluation of the rendering. So I think this is pretty exciting. What I want to do, the whole concept here is to be able to bring natural HTML semantics to the surface and then try to push a lot of the complexity down under the hood so that it doesn't become a distraction. So you can see I have my H1, my P. Then I start to increase the complexity here with an image grid concept. Obviously, content projection takes it up another level of complexity. But then once we're inside of our slot, we're back to the semantic HTML, the images, the paragraph tags, the headers, the lists, so on and so forth. So I think, again, this is going to strike a nice balance, I think, between abstractions, elegance, complexity, and the simplicity of semantic HTML. Yeah, I'm super excited about where all this is going. It just feels like it's going in such a good direction, and hopefully I'm getting to a point where it's actually a thing I can start perhaps using in a production context.